Feudal Japan, 1382 AD. On the small island of Okinawa, in the peak of a monsoon downpour, two men sat cross-legged under the thatched roof porch of a small and mostly empty restaurant. The wooden table between them held only a single bottle of sake and two porcelain cups. Three sides around them were open to the elements, and one could vaguely make out the glittering light of the moon as it bounced and played with the dark water of the ocean 100 yards away from them. There was no wind tonight, and the air was heavy and warm. The rain, so loud and relentless, came down hard all around them, giving the illusion that they were trapped in a prison and confined by a million thin bars of water. As the older man rested his cup on the table, he began to speak of a tale, one that had been requested by the young man that had sat down to join him. The younger man, lifting his own cup to drink, shifted slightly as he readied to listen. And so, the tale unfolded.
A long time ago, an unknown war took place between two friends who became enemies from their own greed. Both wanted to unite Japan, but both wanted to rule the country in different ways. Rikimaru, a good man, wanted peace and equality, a Japan of hope and glory. Hiratori wanted a Japan under his rule, a unified army that would be feared and able to conquer any who threatened. They were both wealthy landowners, and each had a large and loyal army at their disposal. And so, in the height of tension between these two men, both now hungry for power, a great battle took place. I saw many things then that will stay with me forever, but I never could have foreseen the path I would take in the aftermath of that day. The battle took place near Lake Motosu, under the shadow of the great Mount Fuji. We were fighting Hiratori's Red Army in a fierce battle that lasted many grueling hours. Blood was spilled like water that day. Everywhere I looked, in every direction, there was violence, limbs, bodies, carnage. We were outnumbered and luck was not with us. Rikimaru ordered the remaining few of us to retreat, and with our heads hung low and pain in our hearts, we fled from the battlefield. We headed southwest to a village near Yamato to ponder what had just happened, but that's when we were ambushed. You see, Hiratori had left some men on the trail. He must have known where we would go if the worst happened for us. We had underestimated his greed, his will to succeed. Again, the blood flowed. Everyone I knew perished that day. I don't know how, but I managed to escape. Although badly wounded and barely grasping onto my horse, slowly my hearing began to fade as if I was being submerged. Feelings numbed. Vision began to shut down until there was only darkness. I had passed out and had let the horse choose my destiny. Then there was a feeling, a touch. What was happening to me, I thought. I was so dazed, and in the darkness, I was now being hit by hundreds, thousands of impacts all over my body. My eyes slowly opened. I was barely alive. My mind processed everything in slow motion. Where was I? What was hitting me? A blinding light, followed by an image of 1,000 beads of reflections, and then darkness again. The lightning struck with immense power, again reflecting off the rain as it came down upon me. I could barely hear the thunder. I was nowhere. In a field, maybe. The night sky shrouded my sight, and when I saw a figure coming closer, I thought I was hallucinating at first. I was fading away again. I was helpless. And then, everything faded to black once more.
The old man took a pause from the storytelling to take a final sip of his sake. The young man sat, unmoving, deeply involved in the tale. And, after placing his empty cup down, the old man resumed eye contact with his guest, and continued.
I woke in a hut, a bowl of rice and water by my side. I got up aching with a pain I still suffered from battle. No one was there. I walked outside into the blinding sun. Fields everywhere. Massive green layers of fields like steps for the gods going higher and higher into the mountains. And there he was. Although I had no recollection of what had happened that night, I recognized the figure, the shadow. I waited patiently beside the hut, studying the man as he finished his work, and made his way back to his unexpected new companion. We talked for many hours, how he had found me in his fields after seeing a stray horse circling outside. My loyal horse had stayed, remained in the vicinity of the paddy fields. He came to us for food and water every now and then. I had been unconscious for nearly 2 weeks. The old man had done the best he could to tend to my ailments. I owed him my life. Many more weeks passed, and I slowly healed, gained back my agility, and became able to help the old man. We shared the chores through the day and talked over dinner and wine by night. Takahashi would teach me about the paddy fields and his way of life, how best to grow, to frail, and to harvest the best rice. We lived off the land. Rice and vegetables were all I consumed for nearly a year, whilst I stayed with Takahashi. Rice wine was also on the menu, fortunately. The months passed and Takahashi started suffering from his old age. I insisted on doing all the chores so he could be the one to rest now. His time was drawing to an end, and now it was I who tended to his ailments. In time, I developed a new program for my healed body, remembering my old training, and in the calmness and serenity of that place, I studied the force of nature to learn new skills. I used bamboo to construct all I needed, and most nights were spent devoted to the practice of calisthenics and martial arts. October came. Winter was closing in and a bitter cold took hold of the land. There had been a mysterious horseman appear twice at the peak of the fields, skylining himself on top of the mountain. He would come no closer. Whenever I waved at him, he would disappear. I would talk with Takahashi of this strange horseman, but he had never known of this happening before. One morning, I had opened the door to a sight that chilled me to my core. Rikimaru, my friend, lay on the floor in front of me, his head beside him. He was wearing the colors of our once strong army. A note had been attached to him with a knife through his stomach. It read, "You are the last one." It was from Hiratori. They had won the war. I had feared that day would come, and then I feared for my life. I breathed a heavy sigh and looked out upon the fields, and there he was. The horseman. It must have been him, the messenger. I ran, shouting at him, crying for revenge. I would kill him with my bare hands if I had to. I had reached halfway up the mountain when he retreated into the woods and out of sight. I gave up, pausing for breath, but as I turned around, my heart dropped. I ran as fast as I possibly could to the hut, back to Takahashi, but I knew there was nothing I could do. The flames had risen to the heavens as I reached the burning timbers. I fell to my knees knowing that Takahashi was still inside. There was no way he could still be alive.
Again, the old man paused from his tale to clear his throat. The young man leant forward, poured another cup of sake for his host, and briefly motioned to a distant waiter for more wine. Now, politely he sat back and patiently waited for the story to continue.
I caught a glimpse of my horse standing nervously in the field, the fire reflecting in his eyes. I knew I had to run, or I would surely die next. I began to ride away, but I managed one last look, and there he was, again, closer, different this time. He looked as if he was holding something. I thought it was a weapon, maybe a bow. The burning pain came quick as the impact of the cold steel arrowhead tore into my leg. I half fell from the horse, but I knew I had to keep going. Another arrow landed inches beside me. A cloud of mud and dust exploded as it hit the ground. I held onto my horse tightly as he started running for the woods. There was buzzing all around us as more arrows followed us, cutting through the air, but I was in the cover of the forest now. I could escape. Again I had to heal, and again I had to train. For I knew then what must be done. I knew what I had to do. I had to become a shadow. I would return, stronger, silent, deadly, and I would cut the head from this snake. I would assassinate Hiratori. If it cost me my life, I would kill Hiratori.
A distant rumble of thunder rolled over the hills. The sound traversed the empty plains and eventually enveloped the lonely restaurant. The old man continued with his story as the sake flowed freely, and the young man tried his best to conceal a scowl.
I headed north to the snow-capped mountains of Ashina. Rikimaru always told stories of the temple where he trained as a child. He told me of its location once, but assured me I would never need to go there. Well, times had changed, and now Rikimaru was gone, and I had vowed revenge for his death. A true Ronin should not stop till honor and loyalty has been justified. It took me several days to find the temple. Hidden within the mountains, its white outer walls camouflaged against the icy landscape. I had spotted a torii gate and followed the path which led me to the entrance. I recall, as I approached the doors, they slowly opened for me. They had obviously seen me coming. I knew of the master there from the tales I had been told, and I asked for him by name. He sat me down and I told him what had happened, much as I am telling you now. He listened patiently, intently to my plight. I could see that he was deeply saddened by Rikimaru's death, and commiserated with me as we talked of how we had lived both before and after my friendship with that great man.
The old man paused once more, but this time he did not retrieve his cup for refreshment. He simply stared out to the pouring rain, through the rain, as if looking into the past, remembering those days.
Within those temple walls, I was trained both physically and mentally. Despite my outward bravado, the master could see that internally I was a broken man. He taught me the art of Zen meditation. It helped me come to inner peace and showed me a meaning in so many things I had never known before. The memories of that place are coming to me as I remember sitting on the mountains, staring out over that beautiful view, at one with the elements. The peaks of the mountains seemed to cascade forever, darker and darker as the distance increased. Snow fell so slowly there, as if in slow motion. As it gently came to rest on the ground, eagles would soar high above as the many hours passed. By day and by night, under the pale moon that lit everything in a pale blue, its light intensified by the settled snow. Physically, I became something I never thought I could be. Although I was strong in a natural sense, I had yet to know how to be so effective without even using strength. I was taught the secret arts of ninjutsu, shown how to become one with my surroundings, how to blend into the shadows, move quickly without noise, and kill within the blink of an eye. Never to show emotion and focus only on the task at hand. I don't know how long I stayed up there in those sacred mountains. Time had no essence, no importance in that place. But I had become what I needed to be. I knew then that I was ready. The master also knew when the time had come, and when I went to see him, well, he was already waiting for me. He presented me with a beautifully crafted katana sword. I was stunned at its perfection, and unwilling to take it. But it is rude to decline such a gift as this. I put the sword over my shoulder, thanked him, bowed, and turned to start my journey back to Yamato.
As the waiter approached the table, the young man collected the new bottle of sake, thanked the waitress for her assistance, and proceeded to pour 2 fresh cups. The old man paid little attention to the actions of the young man. Neither did he notice the growing unease in his demeanor.
When I got to Yamato, I was shocked to find it was half the village it used to be. An elderly man approached me and took me into a nearby market hut. When I told him I was once with the White Army, he reacted with no surprise, for he had recognized me from that fateful night so many moons ago. He told me what had happened after the White Army was slain. Hiratori had ordered the village be burned to the ground, and many innocent people were murdered. The villagers saved what they could and rebuilt in time, but they had never forgot that night. They hoped that one day someone would slay Hiratori before it was too late, and the whole of Japan had to suffer from the tyranny of this man. When I told him of my story and why I had returned, a glimmer of hope came over him. By this time, others had come to listen to our conversation, and wine was offered to me freely. They said I could stay with them for the night, and that they would pray for my success. Although they quite rightly believed that one man could not take on an entire army, they had faith in my plan. For an army, no matter what its size, was useless without a leader. Later that day, I was taken to their tailor. He assured me that he would work through the night to make me an outfit from his best materials. A dark, navy blue outfit for a silent warrior of the night. A phantom. A ninja. I had only one request. A white headband be made with the name Rikimaru in bold red letters at its center. That night, we dined and drank wine near a roaring fire, and the villagers would toast in hope of my success, although I imagine most believed I was on a suicide mission. In the morning, I went to the tailor to find everything waiting for me. I thanked him and headed to the market hut to see the old man. He was sitting with his family. I bowed and said my goodbyes. He stood up, returned the bow, and gave me a small box before saying farewell and good luck. I left that village hoping that soon I would return to stay with those people, for they were the closest thing I had to friends. The journey back to Lake Motosu took some time. I used it to think of what lay ahead of me, and on one night, as I prepared to rest, I opened the box. Inside were 5 finely crafted shurikens with the words White Ninja engraved on them. Ha! This gave me great pride and enthusiasm for my mission. In the morning, I would leave early, before the sunrise, while the mist still covered the land, and I would arrive at the lake by nightfall.
The old man took a pause, sensing the intensity of the young man's gaze upon him. He lifted his head and made eye contact with his guest. The two men stared at each other for a prolonged moment, and during this time, a realization began to dawn.
When I got to Hiratori's fortress, the night had taken away the last of the remaining light. The full moon was slowly disappearing as the dark clouds rolled overhead. I tied up my horse nearby and made my way round to the rear. There was hardly a noise in the air that night, and I had to be deadly silent as I scaled up the wall and came to rest on top of the structure's tiles with perfect balance. I remember a brief flash of lightning lit the horizon. I smiled at the impending storm, jumped down from my perch, and headed onto the path that led through the grounds, sticking close to the walls and the shadow that it cast over the small bushes that dwelled close to it. Without noise, I passed the guards. Without being seen, I hid in their presence. None of those men even knew I was there, or how close they were to their enemy. As I crept into the courtyard, I could see Hiratori's room in the main temple house, a candle flickering inside. I recalled that I pondered on how relatively unguarded the grounds were, compared to how I imagined it would be when I dreamed of that night. But then, suddenly, two samurai turned a corner and began walking toward me. Sworn to the protection of Hiratori and ordered to kill anyone who entered the sacred grounds of his temple, they would gladly risk their own lives to thwart my plan. This answered my question. With the samurai protecting you, one would not expect much else. So, there I was, clutching my sword and concentrating on the movements of my opponents, studying their patrol routes, trying to foresee how I would pass unnoticed, or, failing that, how they would attack me. The first samurai remained still whilst the second slowly sidestepped away, as if he was attempting to flank my position. For the first time that night, I felt unease. In the background, I could hear a gentle wind blowing through the temple walls, the mist coming off the nearby lake, expanding over the land, and had now entered the temple grounds, making vision deceptive, with shadows forming all around us. It seemed as if nature had sensed my fears, and was filling the night with an ominous atmosphere. As if on cue, a light rain began to fall from the night sky, and began to settle on the blades of grass that would become our battlefield. The second samurai was almost directly to the right side of me now, and I could see that the guard in front of me was about to sneeze. I took the opportune moment, quickly reaching for the throwing star in my belt, and releasing it with a steady aim at my opponent's head. It lost height in the rain, and embedded itself into his neck. He let out a faint guttural noise as he fell to his knees, and finally lay to rest. The second samurai reached for and drew his sword in panic, but remained stationary, the shock and confusion of what had just happened still fresh in his mind. A moment passed, and then he came for me, sword first, and with vengeance and determination in his eyes. I sighed as I drew my sword, as we danced around the grounds, swords clashing, metal sliding off metal. We were almost oblivious to anything else. The rain had stopped now, but the samurai had misplaced a footing and slipped on the wet grass. I saw an opening. I turned quickly to my left and brought my sword down hard onto the back of his neck, leaving a fatal wound. The samurai fell to the ground. He was finished, and I let him die in peace. I bowed at this great warrior before continuing to the main building. I didn't risk going through and up the stairs in case of more defense. No, instead, I scaled the outer walls and climbed the slope levels one by one until eventually I was outside Hiratori's window.
Now the old man, aware of his surroundings, noticed the posture of his guest, a tightness about his person, a tenseness. almost paralyzed by some fear or anxiety. But still he remained, sitting, listening.
As I peeked in, I could see him. Kneeling on the ground beside a candle, a book in his hand and a drink in front of him. His shadow danced on the walls beside him. His back was slightly turned towards me. A dark figure moved past the shoji on the far wall. I had to be silent, or the guard would hear. Gently, slowly, I climbed through the window and crept up to him. But somehow, he sensed I was there. He rose and turned in one motion, and we stood there, looking at each other. In his eyes I could see that he suspected who I was, but did not know for sure. I jumped forward, unsheathing my sword, as he sidestepped and collected his. When I turned to face him again, he was ready. The light reflecting off his blade almost blinded me as it swung through the air, but I managed to duck in time and rose with a powerful kick that knocked him backwards and sent him through a nearby window. I ran to see where he had fell, but he was not there. Nothing was there. But then I saw the shadow. He was descending down to the grounds. I quickly followed, for I couldn't allow him any advantage upon reaching the ground. From the last ledge, I jumped and somersaulted over him. He turned to face me as we drew our katanas for the final time. And so, there I was, clutching my sword and staring straight into the eyes of this evil man, this hated dictator, this murderer of honest men, my opponent. He stood a few paces away from me, breathing heavily. We were both ready for combat, but we simply stood there, anticipating each other's moves, waiting for the first strike. I developed a hyper-awareness. Every motion, every sound flooded my senses. In the background, I could still hear the gentle wind blowing over the land, the rustle of bamboo shoots and nearby trees, the blades of grass swaying ever so slightly as the wind caught them. Still, we stood there. In time, the rain returned. I could hear drops tapping on my sword, almost urging me to attack. The wind picked up speed, and with it, the noises around me increased to a crescendo until the rain suddenly paused, only for a moment, and then with a burst of thunder overhead, the heavens opened and a torrential downpour fell upon us. It was in this moment that we both attacked at the same time, as if reading each other's minds. It was a grueling battle. We fought hard for some time, fast, slow, tactically. Blood was spilt on both sides, but finally, my blade was victorious. As he lifted his sword high, I drove mine forward, and it cast its way into his stomach. His eyes widened as I stared straight into them. A thin line of watery blood dripped from his chin as his mouth closed. I withdrew my sword and stepped away as he dropped to his knees. And that's when he spoke his only words to me. "Who are you?" he said in a faint voice. In front of him now, I removed the cloth from my face. I said, "My name is Ritsuko, and I serve Rikimaru's White Army." Before he could let out a scream, I swung my sword down hard from an angle, cutting his head clean off. I looked around me. Surprisingly, there were no guards. I took off my headband, threw it onto his lifeless body, and walked away.
Outside the restaurant, the rain continued to pour, continued to imprison them within the sheltered confines of their chosen table. Another pause ensued as the old man took a break from his story and finished off his wine. The tension in the air was palpable. The aftermath would be fatal. Under the table, both men now clenched a weapon.
I returned to the village where I lived for many years. I never spoke of that night, only to say that I had fulfilled my duty to Rikimaru, and that the Red Army had been punished. But I could not forget the events that led to that fateful night, and it tormented me constantly. I became a different person. I needed to remember what I had learned up in the mountains, such peacefulness. I needed to find a place of serenity. I have always loved the ocean and see peace in the waters. The fluid, pure motion, and the sound of its waves are calming for me. Everything has beauty in water, especially light glistening over the surface, much as it is now. And so, I moved out here 2 years ago, and I will never leave.
As the old man finished his story, he relinquished the grip on his weapon. The younger man, now seemingly both relaxed and determined, sat up and fastened his kimono. The bottle in front of them now empty, he blessed the old man and thanked him for such a remarkable story. "You have filled in the missing gaps for me," he said, as he began to rise from the table. "It has taken many years for me to find you. My name is Arashi. Hiradori was my father," he said, as he drew his sword and delivered the vengeful blow.